I'm just gonna put a blanket apology right now on all of the names that I'm probably mispronouncing in this video. So there you go. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Jasmine throne, and this was an e-arc I got through NetGalley. It sounded like something definitely interesting that I wanted to check out. I had not read anything by this author previously, and so wanted to give it a go, and it's an India-inspired kind of fantasy setting that takes a look at a big political type plotline going on, as well as taking a look at some really interesting differing religions, imperialism, and a lot of other pieces as well. And the first thing I want to talk about with this book is it is not a romance novel, because I got approved for this through NetGalley, and then I went to look up a little bit more about it because all I had read was a brief synopsis when I had requested it, and it sounded interesting, and a bunch of the reviews made me think this was going to be a romance novel. Now, there is a romance between two of the lead female characters, but it's like that's not the focus at all of this story. So if you are wanting a pure romance, that's not really what this is, I would say. And if you're like, I don't want to read a romance, well, this really isn't that. So I don't know why so many people focused on that in reviews, but I didn't get that at all. It's there, it's present, but it's really just like kind of happening with a lot of other stuff going on. Because in this world, like I said, it's an India-inspired setting, and we are in the, not really kingdom anymore, but of Ariana, which I'm, like I said, probably mispronouncing, but and this was a kingdom that was subjugated by the overall empire, the Parjati, and I know I already did the blanket apology, but every time I say one of these words out loud that I just had read, they feel wrong, so I'm sorry again. But the Parjati Empire has subjugated them because they had, in the kind of their time of power, their like religion and magic systems based around these creatures called the Yaksa, and they became very powerful. So the Parjati religion, which is very different, there were several women who essentially like burned themselves as a sacrifice to destroy the Yaksa and allow these people to be subjugated. And so the empire has a lot of places that were, some were conquered, but a lot of it's kind of like a almost like city states. They're a part of the empire. They give allegiance to the emperor, but they do have some measure of freedom to run themselves. But Ariana is not at all like that in this country. It's still looked down upon because they had been the conquerors, and so they're subjugated a lot harder. They have very little freedom, and they're not allowed to practice their religion or their language or art or any of those types of things. So that's kind of where we're introduced to. And I feel like we got a lot of rich history and rich world building throughout this first book. And that was the part that I found the most fascinating, is just learning about all of these things that are going on, the kind of the political situation. And a lot of it does play in quite a lot too, based on it. We learn too that there's this kind of like sacred forest, and it's like the forest is very sacred, and even outsiders don't go there because they're very superstitious about it. And you can get, basically, if you take the sacred wood, it has a lot of power. It can heal or grant people other types of power. And we also learn immediately, this is still, like I said, I've talked a lot about it, but this is one of those books that I feel like is a lot easier to talk about than some, because the overall plot, you can get into quite a lot without actually spoiling what's going to happen, because it's just kind of backstory, and it was done well. So none of this is spoilers. This is still spoiler free. But we learn pretty much immediately also about this sort of like disease called the rot, which originally sounds like comes from the forest, but it basically starts turning people into kind of like tree, plant, human hybrid things slowly until it kills them. Like their veins will start to be green, like their fingernails will harden. They'll get like leaves that'll like grow out of their head, and the imagery was really interesting for it as well. And so that's kind of introduced as this thing, and that's another reason that this country is really looked down upon. They have the Ra, and the kind of overall political situation is we have the emperor who ended up inheriting from his father. Of course, it's an empire. Was actually the younger son because the older son had gone off to become a priest of another faith, which does play in a bit as well. And so this younger son is very cruel and just kind of hell bent on having absolute power and just really hates outsiders, especially this country. So we're introduced to that, as well as there are rebels from Ariana that are trying to win their freedom. There's political factions that are against the empire, or the emperor, even though they're part of the empire. And we are introduced to Melini, who is the sister of the emperor, and she refused to be burned as a sacrifice, and so is basically being imprisoned and sent off to stew until at which point she decides she will go ahead and be sacrificed and be burned, like, apparently she's expected to do. So that's a big part as well. And we get, she's being stored in this place called the Harana. And it's kind of like this weird temple structure that plays a lot as well into the magic system. And I don't want to get into too many details there because that is something that's slowly revealed a little bit more. But the setting and the history, the political situation, all really, really interesting and were some things that I really, really enjoyed about this book. Unfortunately, things I enjoyed less were the characters and the prose. And the prose wasn't bad. It just kind of fell a little bit flat for me. I will, full disclosure, say I was reading this at the same time I was reading Robin Hobb, so that could play some into it, because Robin Hobb has excellent prose. So a lot of it fell a little flat. That might have been part of the why, and so I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but a lot of the characters here felt very, very flat and interchangeable, and so that was one thing that definitely disappointed me a bit. The two main characters, Priya, who is a maidservant in the house of the regent of the Ariana, and then Melini, who is, like I said, the sister to the emperor, those two do get a lot of characterization throughout. I feel like we get to know them, we get to know their motivations, but a lot of the other characters, especially the more secondary characters, we keep getting introduced to them, and at times it was really hard to remember who was who because everyone kind of talks the same, acts the same. There wasn't really any difference in so many of the characters, and so that just kind of takes me out of a story a little bit when I don't really feel a lot of depth to the characters. So there definitely may be more characterization happening later on, and we do get some characters who like kind of get character development. But there was one specific character too that goes through like a huge change, and we're led to believe that they were kind of like that all along, but it just kind of almost felt unearned because we didn't really get enough insight into the character to really know that this development was really happening. And so that part, like I said, was just a little bit disappointing. A lot of the characters that we meet, and we do get some that we only see a brief amount of time with as well. And I think part of it too is setting up. This is the first book in the series, so more will need to happen, and you're always going to have to set some things up. But that's really what kept me from really, really liking this book. I did like this book. It's definitely something I'll be interested to see where it goes with the rest of the series. But kept me from putting up higher just with a lot of the characters feeling pretty flat besides the main two. Those two we did get, I feel like, quite a lot of insight into and looking at their very, very different pasts and personalities and how it's affected them as people. So those two, good on you. But the rest, just a lot of them, I didn't get a ton of life out of. The one other thing that this is somewhat nitpicky for me, but it is something that really annoys me in books. I've said this in other reviews before. If you're gonna do like a kind of mystery type reveal, don't make it so obvious and then act like I'm not supposed to have figured it out, because that happens a bit at the end. There's one of the other. There's several characters from a faith called that follows the nameless god, and they never tell anyone their true names because every person's name is a prophecy of something that's going to happen. Some are really minor and unimportant. Others are very important, and we keep getting it brought up where this character just doesn't want to say their name until the time is right because it's a prophecy and it's going to affect the main characters. And it was just like when they finally did it, I'm like, yeah, that was really obvious. I mean, I could clearly see that's where it was going. And there were just a couple of things like that at the end where it made it seem like I wasn't supposed to know and were really, really obvious. And I'm fine with a twist. I'm fine with a bit of mystery, but it's like if you're trying to make it seem like this big mystery, but it's obvious, it's just kind of like I don't really care about the reveal. So it's a fine line to walk if you're putting that sort of thing in your book. And just for me, that didn't work really with that device. Now, the way it ended, like I said, I completely saw it coming. It made sense as well. And I still think it was a good ending. And like I said, I am interested to see where it is going to go. It's definitely a series that, like I said, I think this ended up being like a 3-star for me, which means I liked it. That's always the way I go. 3 is I liked, 4 is really liked, 5 was loved, and it definitely had the potential to be a 4-star for me because as I talked quite a lot about the kind of the political situation, the magic system, which, like I said, I can't even get as much into that because that's where we get into some spoiler territory with seeing what that can do. But it was really interesting, and I loved the world building in this. I just think characters need some work, and not trying to make me not know something really obvious was really my only other complaint here. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, I have not read anything else by Tasha Suri, so I may have to check out some of her other books because I know there are a few and they looked fairly popular from what I was seeing on Goodreads. So definitely an author that I will have to watch out for and check for the rest of this one. But this, like I said, I did really enjoy. If you want to read something different with kind of a different setting than what you get in a lot of fantasy with more of a Western setting, this definitely had that. It was a really interesting setting in general. Like I said, there is romance in it. It's not really a romance novel, so I can't say, like, if you really want a good romance, like, I thought the romance was fine. Some books, it's just, to me, romance novels tend to be a lot more in your face with it, and I don't like that. I don't like romance novels in general. It's not a thing that I like to read. This was a bit more understated. It did definitely have some of the themes, and I think something that the author did want to hit on as well, so I definitely should mention, is specifically that it was two females having the romance, and there were notes to that in when the country of Ariana was in power, men could love men, women could love women, and that was okay, but that's absolutely not okay with the Parjati Empire, and so that's kind of brought up with those roles as well. So there was no point where it came off as preachy to me or like, we're really going to shove this romance in. It was just something that was there. It made sense for the characters that we saw with it, and I didn't really have an issue with it at all. So I was, like I said, I was worried. I'm like, did I actually get a romance novel from some of the reviews? But there was a ton going on, and that was just part of the story. And I think if you're going to include romance, I don't mind having romantic elements in fantasy as much. I just don't want that to be the focus because that's not my thing. And to me, this book did not do that, and Tasha Suri did not just like throw it at you for the romance as well. So that I did enjoy. Those really are my thoughts, though, on the Jasmine Throne. So let me know if this is something that you are planning on reading. If you know this author, there are other books. Let me know too which ones I should check out. I don't remember what they were called, but I know there were at least a few. So I'd be interested to hear from you on that. I will include a link down in the description, a pre-order Amazon affiliate link. If you'd like to buy this book, then you can click that and I get some sort of small commission. So feel free to do that if you'd like, or if you're going to be getting this book. I'll leave that in there for you. But like I said, let me know your thoughts on the review on this book or the author in general, since it's not an author I'm super familiar with. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. Check the link in the description for a link to the Wizardly Duo Discord if you want to chat with us about books or anything else. Always having a lot of fun discussions there. And of course, if you would like to see more of my content, make sure to subscribe.